Pushkin. Hey everyone, today we'll hear Rick Rubin talk to one of his all-time favorite vocalists, Tom Jones. In the mid-'60s, when artists like the Beatles and Bob Dylan were starting a counterculture revolution, Tom Jones was getting his start singing old standards and 50s rock and roll at clubs around South Wales. Jones signed his first record deal in '64 and went on to release now timeless hits like It's Not Unusual and Green Green Grass of Home. With his soulful baritone and unique interpretation of American R&B and gospel, Jones became a mainstay at hip cabaret clubs in London, New York, and Vegas. It became commonplace for female fans to throw their underwear on stage during his performances. Of course, that later became a trope of the sex symbol crooner. On today's episode, Tom Jones shares stories with Rick from his remarkable career, including the first time he met Elvis on a movie set in Hollywood, and the night he turned down an invitation to join Little Richard on stage in LA out of fear he'd be deported. He also talks about why he thought Burt Bacharach's lyrics to What's New Pussycat were a joke the first time he heard them. This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond. Here's Rick Rubin and Tom Jones.
The last time I saw you was, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago in Las Vegas, backstage after you sang, and
that's right.
It was a beautiful night for me. I guess it was a regular night for you because that's what you do all the time.
It was a long time ago though. It was longer than, because I haven't been to Vegas now for about 12 years.
Could it be that long? I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I don't think you had done the Johnny Cash albums either at that time.
Really? I must have.
And you hadn't done I know you hadn't done the Neil Diamond one.
Really? Is that true?
Yeah. Because I remember when the Neil Diamond one, I called him and said how good I thought the album was. And it's quite a while after I saw you.
Yeah. That was a good one. I like that one too.
Yeah, I love that album. I think it's the best album he's ever done.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I loved him since young, like you. You know, like same era of I saw you guys both when I was a kid growing up on TV.
Yep.
And I got to see you perform when I was young. My parents brought me to see you at Westbury Music Fair on Long Island. So I saw you, probably sometime in the 70s, I would imagine. Would that make sense?
Yep. But with Neil, we started at the same time in the 60s. I remember meeting him in London in 65, when I had It's Not Unusual, and he was writing then for different people,
Yeah.
I think he had done something with Lulu. Yeah, he'd done a few things with British artists at the time.
Tell me about the world of music. Was it 1963 when you started?
Yeah, when I went to London in 63. I recorded in 64. I did a song called Chills and Fever, which was a sort of a rock and roll thing, because in those days, Peter Sullivan, the guy that became my recording manager, he saw me singing in dance halls and clubs in Wales, and I was doing basically 50s rock and roll. And so he thought that would be the way to get me going, Yeah, so he found this song called Chills and Fever, which was done by a guy called Ronnie Love, I think his name was. It was an R&B record, and we made it more into a rock and roll record. And I mean, it sort of registered slightly, but nothing. It was a hit in Australia. I remember that. So then we had to rethink, and I was doing demos in London. Gordon Mills was my manager, and he was writing for Leeds Music. And so I used to do demos for different things. And then he wrote It's Not Unusual, and I did the demo on it. It was for Sandy Shaw, really, who had some hit records at the time. And so when I heard it, I said, this is it. This sounds like a hit record to me.
Yeah.
And then Peter Sullivan said, well, if you're going to do it, we got to pump it up, because it was a milder song. It's a sort of a Brazil 66 type feel to it. But I was basically 50s rock and roll music. That's what I lived, really, before that. But then you get strange with recordings, as I'm sure you know, but it sort of starts to lay a path. Because I did It's Not Unusual with brass, people wanted, or the record company anyway, Decca Records, wanted more of the same. And then Burt Bacharach did What's New Pussycat for the Woody Allen film. And there I go again, with a pop record. And all the time I wanted to do like Wilson Pickett, and I was into soul music by that time, but I could never get an original song. If I was going to do a soul type thing, it would have to be covers, So What's New Pussycat? Then we didn't know what to do after that. So then I did the green grass of home. So it's always different things sort of pop up.
Originally, it was more 50s rock and roll for you.
Yeah, oh yeah. When I was doing the clubs and pubs and dance halls in Wales, where I come from, South Wales, that's what I was doing. It was Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley and Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. They were the ones, And when I listen to those records today still sound fantastic.
Yeah, Little Richard records sound like they're going to explode. They're so exciting.
Oh, to get away from those. Sometimes I'll try and listen to the radio nowadays, which there's some decent stuff. But once I start playing 50s rock and roll music, I got a job to get away from it.
Yeah. As
far as listening is concerned, and boogie records. I love boogie woogie. Pete Johnson and Albert Hammonds and Meade Lux Lewis, Professor Longhair. Those people. I love that kind of stuff.
How about the blues? Has the blues been a part of your repertoire as well, listening?
Yeah, well, when I was young, I was always listening to voices. I liked the way people sounded. I think that's what it was. So, like, when I heard Mahalia Jackson sing, I thought, my God, those gospel songs came to life. I mean, we were singing those songs in chapel, in a Presbyterian chapel. Same songs. A lot of them were, but not like that. So that got me interested in black gospel music and rhythm and blues, but mostly New Orleans type. I loved Louis Armstrong. I loved that stuff that was coming out of New Orleans. The blues, as far as the blues were concerned, Lead Belly I'd heard, but my favorite was always Big Bill Broonzy, was always more musical to me than some of the other ones that came a little later, like Muddy Waters, and there was more sort of electric blues. As with Big Bill Broonzy, he was playing acoustic guitar and like fingerstyle, more than, but very rhythmic. He was very rhythmic within himself, just playing and singing. So as far as the blues was concerned, I would say Big Bill Broonzy was the one that I was listening to there.
Have you ever considered making a gospel album?
Yeah, well, when I did Praise and Blame, with Ethan Johns, we did some Ain't No Grave,
Yeah.
Gonna Hold My Body Down, and we did quite a few gospel songs.
Beautiful.
Then, but I've never actually recorded a whole album of gospel songs, which it could happen. And the same thing with blues.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Big Bill Broonzy stuff that I would love to do. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
It's always, as you know, it's where do I go from here?
Yes.
Where what? But you've got to have some kind of theme. You've got to have some kind of an idea to link the stuff together, as opposed to just going in there and recording a mishmash of material. Because I like so many different types of songs as well. You see.
Yeah.
I used to love Frankie Lane. When Frankie Lane came out. So I like those big sort of soulful ballads, like I Believe.
Yeah.
But then again, that's of a gospel nature as well, you see.
In the early days in Wales, what was the music scene like? You were of rock and roll age. It's funny because the perception of you is not in the world of rock and roll.
No, I know. I know. But as I was saying, recording those songs in my early recording, see, it's not unusual, and then What's New Pussycat, it sort of takes you that way. But my love has always been 50s rock and roll music before anything else. Yeah. Jerry Lee Lewis is still Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah. And I suppose age-wise, you were probably contemporary with the Beatles, no?
Yeah. Well, the same thing. See, we were all the Beatles, the Stones, Van Morrison, Joe Cocker. We were all listening to those early, 50s rock and roll music.
Yeah.
When anybody has asked, what was the first rock and roll record? It's always Rock Around the Clock. from Blackboard Jungle, from the movie. And everybody will tell you the same thing, of our age. And then when I realized that when I'd asked musicians about them later on, that things were mic'd individually, which they had never done with a rhythm section before. That's why they sounded so hot. So, I remember asking Count Basie about it. I said, what do you think of rock and roll music? Why do you think it sounded so different? He said, because they spent more money on it. He said, this all comes from rhythm and blues, really.
Yeah.
But those early black records that were being made, they didn't have the money to spend, to make them sound like the records then that came later. Like when Little Richard then came on the scene, they were black records still, but they sounded much better than the earlier records, that the black entertainers recorded.
Living in Wales, was it hard to hear this music? How did you get to hear it?
Yeah, well, on the radio, you see, but the BBC, they had to play everything because we didn't have any regional stations. We didn't have a gospel station or a country station. It was all the BBC. And then there was a station that came out of Germany called Radio Luxembourg that you could get if you had the right the right radio set. You could pick that up, and they played more blues, gospel, country than rock and roll. And when I heard something, and I thought, what is that? Why is that different? Because I was born in 1940, so the big band music was still being played. And Frank Sinatra and those singers that sang with bands. They were big bands that were being, so that was the music. And Vera Lynn, in the war and after the war, those songs that Vera Lynn would sing. So they were the things that I heard. But then you get that occasional American R&B, or blues record that would come on, or gospel, and I knew it was different. And a lot of people of my age, we were being influenced by that. When you heard it, you think, that's different. Why is that different? Why does that sound like that? Who is that? And you look into it then.
What were the other big voices from your youth that you just felt like these are the voices that are inspiring?
Well, Frankie Lane was definitely one. And Billy Daniels, and Old Black Magic, when he sang Old Black Magic, I get a kick out of you.
Yeah.
That was different. That he sang it different to what Frank Sinatra did. Billy Eckstine, when he did I Get a Kick, it was like, he meant that he was really getting a kick. He was, he had the way with the words. So, and Tennessee Ernie Ford. When I first heard those boogie records that Tennessee Ernie Ford did, Catfish Boogie and Blackberry Boogie, and I think they were the beginning of that rock and roll sound, that was being done, because it was a heavily piano. I think it was Moon Mulligan was playing piano, I think, on those records. So that they were definitely different, but they were boogie records, you see.
Were you a fan of any of the previous generation singers, like the Sinatras, that came before rock and roll as well, or not so much? Not so much.
Afterwards, funnily enough, I learned to appreciate Sinatra when I got older. No, I wasn't a fan of that music. Rock and roll, when rock and roll kicked in, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like, oh my God, this is tremendous. And all the musicians, and singers at the time hated it, the established singers, because they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's a strange thing, because I was talking to musicians when I was in the 50s. I was working in a glove factory making gloves, and all these glove cutters, these guys that were making the gloves by hand, they were musicians, they were amateur musicians, they're playing in dance bands and everything. And rock and roll would come on the radio, and I would be like with the ruler, banging this desk I had to work at to do 1, 2, 3 o'clock. It was like, Jesus. So they said, what is that crap? And I said, well, what's the matter with you? It's tremendous. And they were trying to get me to listen to, other music. And I said, no, this is it. And they said, well, it's nothing. It's easy to do. Then I would go and watch them in these bands that they were playing in, and they would try and play them, and they couldn't do it. They just could not do it. It's a strange thing. Elvis Presley used to talk about it when he first went on television, to try and get those TV bands in America, like the Dorsey Brothers. When he went on there, they couldn't play it.
Yeah.
Quincy Jones was telling me, he said it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And until he brought his rhythm section in, so it's a strange thing. And boogie music is the same. A lot of piano players, they don't think much of boogie woogie, but get them to play it.
Yeah, it's a feel thing. It's like if you don't feel it, it's not about playing it right. It's about feeling it. And the way you sing, even though you have essentially what feels like an operatic voice, there's a groove always when you're singing. That's why I asked about the blues earlier. It's like it feels like there's a grooviness always.
Yeah.
In your interpretations,
There's always a blues. There's a blues element on all the songs that I've done.
Yeah.
Even the ballads. I tend to lean towards bluesy notes. Whenever I can inject them in there.
Yeah. No, it sounds more like you, and it makes it feel more personal, and it makes it feel more soulful and more from the heart than just singing the notes of the song.
Yeah, well, that's what I felt about a lot of the singers that came prior to that. The big band things, and the songs didn't register with me, except for the ballads. I mean, I always loved My Funny Valentine, and I always loved Autumn Leaves.
Your recording of Autumn Leaves is staggering.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
I was 24 then.
So good.
Yeah, well, see, that first album that I did, Along Came Jones, I had to do that song. I always loved that song since I was a child. And but then, Memphis, Tennessee is also on there, you see.
Yeah.
And I Need Your Lovin', it's like, whoa, 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 dan, 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 it's like on the same album.
Yeah. How old were you when you went to London?
I was 23, and then I recorded that I was 24.
And how did it work out for you to get signed? And tell me the first experience of going to London. Well,
when I did an audition, they'd heard me sing demos. We were sending demos to different record companies, and Decca Records, Peter Sullivan, he heard the demo that I sent, and asked me would I come to London and do an audition, which I did, and he said, fine, we'll sign you if you fancy it, for 3 singles.
Mm-hmm.
It's like three strikes and you're out. It's like you get 3. Yeah, so we did Chills and Fever, because he'd heard me singing, and saw me in these clubs when he came to see me, and thought a rock and roll record would be the way to go. So that was the first one, and then It's Not Unusual was the second record. Wow. So then I was flying then.
Amazing, and that essentially has been, I guess it's the song most associated with you still to this day of everything, I think.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think maybe because I had a TV show in the late 60s, early 70s, and we always opened the show singing that live. I sang it every time live on the show. So I think people heard that, more than anything else. Because anytime anybody sees me, if they're going to sing something at me, it'll be It's Not Unusual.
Tell me about the TV experience. What was that like, having a TV show?
It was fantastic because I could then get people on that I wanted. Like Jerry Lee Lewis was on one of the shows, Little Richard was on the shows, and then a lot of Motown action. Stevie Wonder had just come on the scene.
Great.
Ray Charles came on. Janis Joplin came on. And she wouldn't do variety shows in those days. She said, I'm only doing it because it's you.
Wow.
And I said, well, thank you. And we did a hell of a duet together, I remember.
Great. Did you do duets with everyone who came on?
Everybody, yes.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, it was tremendous. And Wilson Pickett, we did Hey Jude and Barefootin'.
Great.
And Ray Charles, and yeah, everybody that was around in those days. But I had a push for Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, because they said, 50s rock and roll. And I said, look, please, once the show was a success, I had more of a say in it. I mean, I wanted to get Chuck Berry. I wanted to get Fats Domino. I wanted a lot of people. But if they weren't selling records at the time, it was difficult to get them on.
How has the live experience changed from the time you were young to now, just in terms of what's it like? What was it like when you started? What was monitoring like? What were the audiences like? What were the venues like? Talk about all of the different things you've seen over the years, because you've seen it change completely from the early days, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Well, growing up in Wales, I would sing, first of all, in school, and in chapel. That's where I learned to get in front of an audience. Gatherings, weddings and parties in the house. And I come from a large family with a lot of aunties and uncles and cousins. And we're all singers, really. So there was a lot of singing going on in South Wales. And everybody loved singing, and there were a lot of singers. So I would go and watch them when I was old enough to go into the local club, a workman's club. And there were singers that would get up there and sing songs, Frankie Lane songs, and songs like My Mother's Eyes. There was this big rugby player that used to get up there. And on a Sunday night, me and my teenage, we'd say to, oh, come on, Glennog. His name was Glennog Evans. Great name, huh? Come on, give us a song, Glenn. Sing My Mother's Eyes. Sort of half making fun of him. Well, by the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. This fella could he'd do it. He'd just stand there and sing the shit out of My Mother's Eyes. And you think, oh my God, that's it. So I got that. And then listening, as I say, to early, to the blues and to gospel and stuff on the radio, that's what I was listening to. So I would incorporate that sometimes when I would get up but I would always, like, for instance, when I took a rock and roll band into a workman's club, this was in the late 50s, they had never seen electric guitars in these clubs and drums, But I was singing with this local band in a YMCA. So I said to them, do you fancy coming into one of these workman's clubs? Because I used to play guitar and sing, just like that in these clubs. Would you fancy it? Oh, well, we've never done it. I said, well, let's try it. So we go into this workman's club, and they had a habit, if they didn't like you, they would shout, pay him off, which means pay you not to play.
Yeah.
Just pay them and get them out of here. So when we were walking in with the amplifiers, and the guitars and the drum, oh, Jesus Christ, we don't want any of this crap. But I'd been there before, you see. I'd been to these clubs, saying, and I'd get up and say, no, look, fellas, please give us a shot here because you know me. Oh, yes, you are lovely, Tommy. Tommy's got a lovely voice, but we don't want this rock and roll. So I said to the band, the first time I remembered it so well, and I said, look, we'll start off with I Believe, funnily enough.
Yes,
I said,
perfect.
we'll do I Believe. We'll do My Mother's Eyes. We'll do My Yiddish Mama, because I heard Billy Daniels do it. So we would do these things, and then when everybody was like, yes, we get it, we love it, all of a sudden, you shake my nerves and you rattle, you know what I mean? It was like, and they were like in, so that was it.
Yeah.
And then in one night, I remember, from this pay 'em off, when we first walked in, about halfway through the night, the fellow that booked us there, he said, if I call the police station and get an extension on the liquor, the liquor laws only went to like 11 o'clock. He said, if I could get the liquor law to 12, would you play until midnight?
Wow.
I said, yeah, if you pay us a few, a few more pounds. So it was all in one night, from pay them off to could you stay till midnight and move all the tables and chairs back, and they all had a dance. So we took rock and roll music into these workmen's clubs, and then they'd have dances on different nights of the week, and they were starting then to get a lot of younger people coming in, because it was a mothers and mums and dads place to start with, which you wouldn't get a lot of teenagers going into. So then they would start to come into these places. So we built up a reputation of playing pop music, really, but a lot of 50s rock and roll was in there, and they were loving it.
So cool. What a great story. I love hearing about the and you ended up turning them on to rock and roll, and they ended up loving it.
Yeah. I thought to myself, if it's as long as it's presented properly, you know what I mean? As long as you go into their place rather than try to get those, older people to come into a dance hall with a band playing, all records being played, rock and roll records, they wouldn't want to go and do that, but go to them with it,
Yeah.
and present it in a way. As long as you can do some ballads as well, as long as you can do stuff that they can understand, then you can do Johnny Be Good,
Yeah. What were the first performances you did once you were in London? What were those like?
Well, I was doing them mostly in South Wales, and then came and did the record contract, got the records out. Then I was playing quite a lot of American bases, because the Americans were still in Britain, in the early 60s, Air Force bases especially. So we would go and play these places. So I became very popular in these American Air Force bases when I had It's Not Unusual. Even before that, before I had a hit record, we would play them. And so I knew a lot of American songs, you see, which the GIs loved. So I was, we sort of built up a bit of a reputation in these American servicemen's clubs.
What was the first time you came to the United States?
That was to do an Ed Sullivan show.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, in early 65. It was amazing. It's Not Unusual came out in January the 22nd, 1965, and it was number one by March the 1st, in Britain. And it was released in the States, and it went to number 10 on the 100, top 100. So then they booked me on the Ed Sullivan show, and he liked me. So I think I did like 6 Ed Sullivan shows.
Wow, great.
Yeah, in 65. And TV had gone to color, so they couldn't transmit in color from New York. So the Ed Sullivan show had to go to Los Angeles to transmit in color. So then I went to LA. I met Elvis Presley.
Wow, how was that?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, when I used to sing in these clubs in Wales, right? And I would do Elvis Presley songs, of course. And my friends used to say, wow, Tom, you sing that as good as Elvis Presley. I said, well, I'll tell him that. And they said, oh, come on.
Sure.
I said, I got a feeling that I'm going to meet Elvis Presley. I had this feeling.
Yeah.
So when I went to Paramount Studios in LA to talk about a song for a movie, and they said, Elvis is here today and he would like to meet you. Jesus, I mean, this was in September of 65.
Wow.
And I said, my God, I didn't even know that he knew anything about me. So I went onto the set, and he was in a mock helicopter. He was doing the Trades Fair, I think the movie was, with this little girl in this helicopter. And I'm standing in the back of the set, closed set, in this hangar with the Memphis Mafia. And they stop filming, and he waves. So I'm like just standing there, and they said to me, Elvis is waving at you, oh, really? So I waved back, and I had a song out at the time. It was my third single. It was a ballad called With These Hands. And Elvis Presley came out of the helicopter, and he's walking towards me singing With These Hands. And I thought, my God, if the boys back home could see me now, And he did it like Elvis Presley, he pointed at me at the same time. You know what I mean? The way Elvis used to put his hand up, And he's like, with his hands, I will cling to you. And I thought, my God, here comes Elvis Presley singing my song. It was like, it was surreal. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. It sounds like a dream, what you're describing.
A dream. Yeah. It was like a dream. And he said to me, how the hell do you sing like that? Honestly. And I said, well, it's listening to people like you. He said, yeah, but I was brought up with it. He said, I was going into black gospel churches as a boy. Do you have any black gospel churches in Wales? I said, no. The only black people are down in Cardiff, in Tiger Bay, But I said, it's from the radio that I've heard these songs. And he couldn't believe that I sound like I sound coming from where I came from.
Yes. Yes.
Unless you were born there, he couldn't understand it.
Yeah, but in the same way, he got to hear it by being there. You got to hear it by hearing it on the radio, but it was still coming through one way or another. The inspiration was there, and you were exposed to it, and you got to feel it.
Yes, I knew the difference when I would hear Mahalia Jackson sing. I would know the difference by the sound of her voice. So I was attracted to it. So just like Elvis was more attracted to black gospel churches as he was to white, so you've got to be attracted to it in order to know what it is. And whether it's on the radio or whether it's live, you've got to go and think, well, what is that? Why is that sounding so wonderful and uplifting and unreal? That they sound like they mean it.
When you came to the U.S. to do the Ed Sullivan Show, would you also do live performances for audiences as well?
I couldn't bring my band, you see, so that was a problem. So I had nobody to do shows with, really. I remember the first time I met Little Richard was in '65, and I'd seen him do shows in England, before. But I was in Los Angeles doing the Ed Sullivan Show. So I said to my manager, I think I'll stay for a couple of weeks, just to see what's happening in L.A. And so he said to me, well, look, your visa has run out now. You only get a visa for a week to do the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, if you're going to stay any longer than that, you're not on a visitor's visa. You're illegally in the country, right? Mm-hmm. So he said, for God's sake, don't get up in a club or something and draw attention to yourself. So I said, no, okay, I won't. So I'll go to see Little Richard. He's playing a club just off Sunset. So I'm backstage with him and we're chatting away and it was great. And so he introduces me when he's on stage and he asked me to get up on the stage. And I wanted it because I knew every Little Richard song. So he said, come on, let's do this one. And I said, I can't do it, honestly. I would love to. And I still think of that now. To this day, wow. I think, my God, why didn't I just do it? But I was so scared of immigration, and locking me up or something. Yeah. But then I got him on my TV show, you see. Then we did it.
Yeah.
When it really mattered, that the millions of people could then see it. So I got my wish at the end, but I would have loved to have just done that with him that night, in '65.
Where did you do your TV show from?
From London, just north of London.
Great.
Elstree Studios, and which is funny where we do The Voice from now. I'm a coach on the Voice UK, and we do it from the same place.
Fantastic.
From that I thought, my God, after all this time, because that was like 69, 70, 71 when I did This Is Tom Jones. So it's still a pain in the ass to get there, you know what I mean? On the road. But it's great that I'm still doing it, So I always think of that. I think if somebody had told me back then that I would be still going to the studios in Elstree now, it's a great feeling. I love it.
So cool. If you're up for it, let's listen to my very favorite of your songs. Never Gonna Fall in Love is my favorite of them all.
Oh, thank you.
And let's listen to that together, and then you can tell me anything you want to tell me about that one.
Okay.
So beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where'd that song come from?
Well, it was originally a song called I'm Never Gonna Cease My Wandering, which was from the Depression, in the 30s. And I knew the song in Wales, in one of these workingmen's clubs, as a fella used to get up and sing it, I'm Never Gonna Cease My Wandering. And I thought, what a great song that is.
Yeah.
And so then I did some shows with a fella called Lonnie Donegan.
Yes.
In England.
Skiffle.
Yeah, Skiffle, yeah. Which was really old sort of lead belly type blues, they called it Skiffle. So I did some shows with him, and he said, look, I've just written a song, and you would sing the shit out of it. So he played me a demo that he had done on it, Never Gonna Fall in Love Again. Wow. And I said, well, that's Never Gonna Cease My Wandering. He said, yes, it is. But he said, there's no chorus in Never Gonna Cease My Wandering.
I see.
He said, we changed the words and then put that fall in love. Mm-hmm. That wasn't in the original. That wasn't there, which is the most commercial part of the song. And I said, I got to do it. I'm going to try this. And so I said to Peter Sullivan, Lonnie Donegan has written this song and I want to do it. Okay, let's do it. So we did. And then when I did it, we used to get an acetate to take home, to play it at home. And I took it home and we only had the one, right? So my wife took it to my manager's house. We lived close in England. She said, this is what Tom has just done. Well, they were fighting over this acetate. My wife and my manager's wife to keep it that night. My wife says, it's my husband singing it. She said, yeah, but my husband manages it. So there was a big fight over this one acetate because that was the only copy that we had at that point. So to get two women fighting over, over a song, I thought
it was a good sign.
Well, this is going to be a hit, and of course it was. Thank God.
Yeah. It's such a great song, the energy of it. And yes, the hookiness of the chorus. It's got a real sing-along chorus.
Yeah.
And the vocal performance is just stunning. And you save the big note for the ends, almost like a Roy Orbison type. I mean, you're not singing like him, but the drama of building up
the structure
to the big note at the end where you can't think it could get any more dramatic. And then you go there. It's so beautiful. What a great song.
Yeah, thank you.
So talk more about live performances and where were the types of places you played once you started having success and anywhere in the world.
Right. So it went from, I played these Air Force bases, American places, in and around London. And we would play then ballrooms, dance halls. People that had hit records in those days would play either theaters or dance halls, one show a night. And some of them were on piers. They used to have, piers in seaside resorts.
Yeah.
And you'd have a dance hall at the end of the pier. Just like in the States, they had the same thing. And so we would then go and play these dance halls in the summertime, especially on the end of these piers. But then we started getting interests coming from northern nightclubs in the north of England. So my manager and my agent, they said, we get a lot of requests from clubs, dance halls as well, and theatres as well. But these clubs now, up in the north of England, they're putting on a lot of cabaret shows, which were like mini Vegas. When I went to Vegas, I saw, the showrooms in Las Vegas, and they had things very similar, not as grand, but in the north of England. They had these nightclubs, you see, because they had casinos as well, coming in there. So then I started playing these northern clubs. Well, they were like glorified working men's clubs that I had played in South Wales. So that's what happened. So it's been a problem, maybe a nice problem, I don't know. But my audience has always been a wide variety of people, you see. Mm-hmm. So I could play to kids, even in Wales, I could play a YMCA to teenagers on a Friday night and play a workingmen's club on a Saturday to adults.
Yes.
So the same thing basically has gone through my career. I would play the Talk of the Town, for instance, which was a huge nightclub in London in the 60s. And my American agent came to see me there and he said, you got to play the Copacabana in New York. This is where it's at. So I said, okay. So then I played the Copacabana. And they were saying to me, funnily enough, they said, are you scared? Because it's like a lot of gangsters go in there. And I said, excuse me, if you've sung to coal miners and their wives and girlfriends, the mafia doesn't scare me. It's the only difference is they got guns. We didn't have guns. But to get over to those people, you got to be able to deliver. So that was a big thing. In 1968, I played the Talk of the Town in 1967 in London. And then 1968, I went into the Copa in New York. And it was tremendous, to play a place where all these giants of American show business had played before.
Everyone.
Yep. Then that led to the Flamingo in Vegas and the Deauville in Miami. So a lot of these clubs then, nightclubs. But then when my TV show hit, it became so big that I started playing arenas.
Wow.
Basketball arenas, which people had never played before.
Yes.
They'd never had musical venues Maybe Madison Square Gardens, I think maybe was the only one. But all these big basketball arenas then, I started playing because the clubs got too small. Even though I was still playing Las Vegas, I would still go back to Vegas.
Yes.
Which I used to moan about, because I used to say, how come I can make as much money in one night, playing an arena, and I got to play a week, 2 shows a night in Las Vegas? But they said, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But there you go. You do it. When you're young, it's you get up in front of people, whether it's 2,000 or 20,000, you're performing, and that's what I do.
How did the audiences react to different songs in different parts of the world? Is it pretty consistent, or are there variations?
It's about the same. I'm always aware if it's an English-speaking audience.
Yes.
If I'm in Britain or I'm in America or Australia or Canada or, I'm aware of it. But all the European countries, you see all the different countries, they love all the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
So I had a surprise that I had in the 70s when I went to Japan.
Yep.
So I said to promoter, are there any songs you think would go over, more in Japan than, and he said, well, you have to do Danny Boy. I said, Danny Boy? Because I had done it on my TV show, and they saw me doing Danny Boy. And I said, well, do the Japanese people understand the story and he said, it's the emotion.
Wow.
They feel your emotion when you sing it.
Yeah.
So that was a big surprise to me that I had to keep Danny Boy in the show, in Japan especially.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I play Israel, my Yiddish mama in Israel is fantastic.
Fantastic. What's the part of your working life that you most enjoy?
Being on stage. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
That's the part. Like all roads lead to the stage.
Yes.
Everything that I do is it all sort of helps getting me to getting the people in there, so that I can go but to be on the stage, giving it, and receiving from the audience is a tremendous feeling. There's nothing else like it. It's like the closest thing to sex. When you're going up the steps onto the stage,
Yes.
Or just walking from the wings onto the stage, it's anticipation. It's the build-up before you make love. And when you're actually, when you're in it, it's like, and then the coming down afterwards. The relaxing part after you do the show.
Yeah.
If I go to dinner after the show, the food tastes better, the wine tastes better, everything
Beautiful.
is better after that show.
Do you get nervous at all before going on stage?
Well, as I say, like before sex, before making love, let's say.
Yeah.
When you get that exciting feeling, and then you get at it, of course, and then the only time if I get nervous is if I've got a cold or something, that I feel that I'm underpowered, and will it work? Will my voice work as well as I want it to? So I'll get a bit nervous then. But no, excited, yes, but nervous, no.
And how long does it take to come down after the show? Like, how soon can you sleep after a show?
Oh, a long time. I'm a night owl anyway.
I see.
So show business is perfect for me because I live at night anyway. I always have done ever since I was a kid. So it's great. I like to be awake at night.
Yes.
I think the world looks better at night. When you're in a city, if you go out into a city in the daytime, it's bedlam. You go out at night, things are much calmer.
Yeah, and most people are asleep, so there's less energy.
Yeah.
And it's a more peaceful world at night.
Yes, I think so. So it's great, to go to a restaurant and and just relax with some friends, and it's lovely. It's a lovely feeling. The whole thing. And if I'm going to do a runner, and get in a limousine and go somewhere else, or jump on a plane, whatever it is, it's just a great feeling when you've achieved that show.
Are you ever surprised by what songs people react to that you've sung?
Yeah, going as big as they have.
Yeah.
When I recorded The Green Green Grass of Home, I heard the Jerry Lee Lewis version. I bought it on an album in '65 in the Colony Record Shop in New York, and it was called Country Songs for City Folk. And he was doing country songs of the day, of that time.
Yeah.
And The Green Green Grass of Home was a Porter Wagner song. So he did that. But that's the first time I heard it was Jerry Lee Lewis doing it. So I thought, I got to do that. That's a great song. A surprise thing. The man is in a cell dreaming about all this, which I thought was tremendous. So I thought, well, let's try it. And it became a monster. It became huge.
Yeah.
Which I didn't expect. I thought it was going to be a good record. And I think that was thanks to Les Reed as well, who did the arrangement, because he stretched it. Mm-hmm. He made it more of a pop record as opposed to a country record, Yeah, so I didn't expect that. Oh, and What's New Pussycat? When I first heard that, when Burt Bacharach sang that and played it to me, he played the piano and sang it live, I thought he was joking. I said, you must be joking. I can't sing that. And he demoed the record and he said, take it away, have a listen and live with it and see what you think. And then I went in and recorded it. I still didn't think that it was going to be anything. And then, of course, it was the Woody Allen film.
Yes.
The film was a hit. The song was a hit. And there you go.
It's a strange song. It's definitely a strange song.
Oh, the chord changes. I mean, I'd never heard chord changes like that. Da 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 da. What the? What is this?
It sounds like a German drinking song. Like a beer hall song.
That's right. Exactly. So you don't know. I didn't think that was going to be anywhere near what happened to that.
Is it as much fun making music now as it's been from the beginning for you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's even more, you get more freedom now. As when I first started off, you'd get with an arranger, you'd pick the songs, you'd set the key, you get the arrangement done. So all those things were done before you stepped into the studio. And then you'd have a 3-hour session to do 3 songs.
Yeah.
And like the first hour was taken up by getting the balance, and then you'd do the other 2 after that. So you'd have to get 3 songs within 3 hours.
Wow!
And studio time was very expensive, so they told me. In the record company, so it was different. And they had a singles division, and then if you were selling a lot of singles, then you could make an album. Then you'd go to the album section of the record company. So they had two different sections. And then you'd have a bit more time, but you'd still have to try and get 3 songs in 3 hours. Now, I'm going to be recording with Ethan Johns now,
Great.
We're going to start off and go to the studio in Real World in Peter Gabriel's studio in Box in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
And which I've recorded many times, and then we'll live there. We'll go in there for a few weeks, and start kicking stuff around. With a rhythm section, and see what happens.
Do you ever love a song and then record it and feel like it's not right to release?
Yeah, with Leonard Cohen, for instance, I wanted to do a Leonard Cohen song. And I loved "I'm Your Man." So we went in and I thought, I got to do this.
Yeah.
I'll do anything for you. I'll be this and I'll be that, whatever it is, I'm your man. And we were all set to do that. And then we tried it, and it was okay, but it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. And then Ethan said, look, if you really like Leonard Cohen, what about Tower of Song? And I said, let me listen. Well, when I heard it, I loved it. And so we then tried it. Let's try it. And it was great.
Ah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's such a pleasure. I'm a lifelong fan, and I continue listening. And anytime, and this was an opportunity for us to speak, and I went back and listened to stuff that I haven't listened to recently. And again, every time I hear it, it blows my mind. So thank you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. And coming from you, that's a compliment, because I've loved the things that you've done, the records that you've made. Tremendous.
Thank you so much.
All right, Rick, take care.
Thanks to Tom Jones for taking us through his incredible career. To hear more of our favorite Tom Jones songs, check out our playlist at brokenrecordpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter @BrokenRecord. Broken Record is produced with help from Leah Rose, Jason Gambrell, Ben Tolliday, Eric Sandler, and Jennifer Sanchez, with engineering help from Nick Chafee. Our executive producer is Mia Lobel. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like the show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.